Hey everyone, right now, new arenas of energy are beginning to take shape. Dramatic global displays of power have completely shifted global markets, raising concerns over energy security and technological advancement. If you're not paying attention, you're missing out on the single most consequential industrial reorganization of the 21st century. On this episode of Renewable Energy Reality Check, we discuss direct lithium extraction in America as part of reshoring efforts, as well as iron air battery technology for energy storage systems, and the companies working with these advanced technologies: Google, Ford, ExxonMobil, Energy X, and many others. All right, it starts with a question almost nobody is asking out loud. What happens when the most powerful economy in the world decides that its long term survival depends on rewiring itself from the ground up and every supply chain that feeds and powers it? This is exactly what's inspirational about the moment we're in. At the potential speed and scale of strategic deployment, the outcomes will become increasingly astonishing to consumers. It will shock you, but it's happening right now. Now that we're all on board, here's what was said in a statement made by energy experts in the Trump administration. I'm paraphrasing here. Future energy is not just an environmental imperative, it is a national security imperative. Because of foreign-led manufacturing, without domestic production, the United States is leaving a gaping hole in its economy that needs to be filled. So it's an economic and national security absolute for any advanced economy, especially one that previously had become dangerously dependent on foreign supply chains. At the time, America had little industrial control over the very technologies and manufacturing it needed to lead the next era. That's how the DOE structured its response. They created a plan to revitalize domestic manufacturing, strengthen supply chain resilience, expand future tech exports, improve access to affordable energy, and build a world-class workforce. After scientific research and development, assessors began commissioning domestic battery technology, manufacturing, semiconductor production, and critical mineral exploration and recovery, all feeding into one of the most elaborate economic transformations in American history. Strategically, the U.S. government is placing its investments across every tier of long-duration energy storage, from geothermal systems and lithium-ion for hourly needs, to iron air and thermal systems for multi-day resilience, all the way to hydropower, hydrogen, and forms of reciprocal biofuel and e-fuel production. Their explicit mandate is to prove bankability for technologies the private market hasn't yet priced correctly, and to de-risk the debt that makes commercial deployment possible. That is not bureaucracy, that is strategic market architecture. Meanwhile, in upstate New York, the National Science Foundation has funded an energy storage engine with $45 million in Phase 2, with a runway to $160 million over a decade, with one declared ambition: make this region America's battery technology capital. Within 2 years, that engine has already backed 15 startups, catalyzed $20 million in follow-on investment, and built a 60-member coalition spanning academia, industry, defense, and government. Slow? No. This is how ecosystems get built. Then comes Google. 300 megawatts, 30 gigawatt hours, 100 hours of discharge duration, at a single data center in Minnesota powered by iron air batteries from Form Energy, paired with 1,400 megawatts of wind and 200 megawatts of solar. This is not a pilot. This is the world's largest battery project by energy capacity, and it changes something fundamental. Because when Google signs a deal like this at a projected system cost of around $33 per kilowatt hour, roughly 70% below equivalent lithium-ion grid storage, they are not just buying electrons. They are sending a market signal that everyone else in the industry has to respond to. Multi-day storage is real, it is economic, and it is happening now. Google calls it grid citizenship. The idea is that data centers, historically seen as passive consumers of power, become active architects of grid infrastructure. They absorb AI workloads, they fund transmission upgrades, they commit to covering their own incremental grid costs, and in return, the grid evolves around them. This is a fundamentally new relationship between technology companies and energy systems, and it is being codified in law, in state legislation, and in White House pledges signed by the largest tech firms in the world. Now let's look at Ford. When Ford dissolved its battery joint venture with SK On and assumed a $3.8 billion DOE loan for its Kentucky plant, the financial press called it a retreat. They were wrong. It was a pivot. Ford Energy Battery LLC is now retooling that facility approximately $2 billion in capital expenditure to produce containerized battery energy storage systems. storage modules, for data centers, for utilities, for commercial customers, with a target of 20 gigawatt hours annually by late 2027. Detroit is not dying. Detroit is engineering. And that's what's awesome about America. It tells you everything about where demand is actually going. At the core of the grid beneath the technology, beneath the factories, there is lithium. And the race to extract it without destroying the planet is reshaping continents. Direct lithium extraction, or DLE, is the technology at the center of this race. Traditional lithium mining from brine takes up to 2 years in evaporation ponds and consumes vast quantities of water. DLE does it in hours, with recovery rates above 80 to 90%, and with a fraction of the environmental footprint. In Saskatchewan, Prairie Lithium is commissioning North America's largest commercial-scale DLE unit. In Utah, EnergyX is partnering with Compass Minerals to tap 2.4 million metric tons of lithium carbonate equivalent near the Great Salt Lake, a potential $400 million investment, producing over $600 million in annual revenue at full build-out. In Chile, regulators are conditioning new permits on DLE adoption. This is not a niche technology. This is the next architecture of critical mineral supply. And then there is the global chessboard. Europe is moving. Its Industrial Accelerator Act introduces domestic content requirements for clean energy technologies, a Made in Europe framework. But analysts are blunt. It may reduce Chinese dominance at the assembly level while leaving upstream cathode materials, anode materials, and cell production largely in Beijing's hands. The U.S. approach, tying domestic content tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act directly to DLE and critical minerals initiatives, is structurally more integrated. But neither is sufficient without permitting reform and workforce scale. Canada and Chile are positioning in lithium. Thailand and Malaysia are navigating LNG and distributed solar simultaneously. And the United States is attempting something almost unprecedented: to be the energy exporter, the energy technology leader, and the AI infrastructure host all at the same time. Natural gas underpins the short-term logic. AI data centers demand firm, reliable power. Gas delivers it. The ambition to roughly double LNG exports from 12 to 15 billion cubic feet per day toward 27 to 30 by 2030 is not a throwback to fossil fuel politics, but more of a geopolitical strategy, providing allies with alternatives to Russian and Middle Eastern energy while building the fiscal foundation that funds the clean transition at home. Here's what it all means. The United States is not choosing between fossil fuels and clean energy. It is attempting a full-spectrum dominance strategy controlling supply chains, financing frontier technologies, reforming, permitting, building domestic manufacturing, and exporting both energy and the technology to use it. The risks are real: interconnection backlogs, shale decline rates, permitting gridlock, and continued exposure to Chinese critical mineral refining. But the ambition is unlike anything this country has assembled since the space race. But the market is beginning to believe it. The question is not whether this transformation will happen. The physics, the economics, and the geopolitics have already made that decision. The question is, who leads it? That's all for this episode of Renewable Energy Reality Check. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time, and until then, take care of yourselves and take care of one another.